With the Baseball Hall of Fame Veterans Committee releasing their ballot for this year, I wanted to look at a couple of players up for election and discuss whether I believe they ought to be elected into the Hall of Fame. The player for today's video will be Dave Parker. Who exactly is this player, and do I believe he should be elected into Cooperstown? Dave Parker was a right fielder that played in Major League Baseball for 19 seasons from 1973 to 1991. He played for 6 teams, but spent the most time with the Pittsburgh Pirates. In his career, Parker played in nearly 2,500 games and came to the plate over 10,000 times. He slashed .290 with a .339 on base and .471 slugging for an .810 OPS and 121 adjusted OPS. He has over 2,700 hits, which includes over 900 extra base hits, nearly 1,500 RBIs, scored nearly 1,300 runs, collected over 4,400 total bases, and earned 40.1 WAR. He's a 7-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove Award winner, 3-time Silver Slugger, and received MVP votes in 9 seasons. That includes winning the National League MVP award in 1978. You probably remember Parker best for his incredible fielding arm, which he highlighted during the 1979 All-Star Game, throwing out Brian Downing at home plate. As unbelievable as he was at throwing out runners, Parker was one of the most well-rounded players during his career. So how does he compare to others during his generation, as well as all time? From 1973 to 1991, Parker ranks inside the top 5 in hits, RBIs, total bases, and extra base hits. He's 8th for runs scored and times on base, and 51st in WAR. We'll get to that later, but first, among 46 players with at least 7,500 plate appearances during this near 20-year period, Parker is 15th in OPS and 20th in adjusted OPS. Looking specifically at right fielders during his time in baseball, he's within the top 3 in all the mentioned stats, with the exception of WAR, where he ranks 9th. Among 18 right fielders with at least 5,000 plate appearances, Parker is 9th in OPS and 10th in adjusted OPS. Naturally, those rankings are terrific, but that covers his entire career. How good was Dave Parker during his prime? I usually look at a 10-season stretch for prime years, but for Parker, I'm making an exception and extending it to 12 seasons. From 1975 to 1986, Parker ranks inside the top 6 in hits, extra base hits, RBIs, and total bases. He's 12th in runs scored, 18th in times on base, and 25th in WAR. Among 84 players with at least 5,000 plate appearances during these 12 years, Parker has the 9th highest OPS and 15th highest adjusted OPS. If we look again at players at the same position, he's within the top 4 in all the mentioned counting stats. Here's a full breakdown of those rankings. Notably, he has the most hits and extra base hits of any right fielder during this time. It's not easy to excel at hitting for contact and power at the same time, but Dave Parker did, and was perhaps the best at his position to do so for an extended period of time. Moving on, among 24 right fielders with at least 3,000 plate appearances during these years, he's 3rd in OPS and 6th in adjusted OPS. Many of those stats speak for themselves, but that's all in comparison to players during Parker's career. How well does he hold up when compared to players throughout all of MLB history? Among all players all time, he's inside the top 60 in total bases, extra base hits, and RBIs, top 70 in hits, top 145 in times on base and runs scored, and top 360 in WAR. Among 87 players with at least 10,000 plate appearances, Parker is 55th in OPS and 52nd in adjusted OPS. For what it's worth, if we lower the minimum threshold by 25% to 7,500 plate appearances, in which there's been 365 players to achieve that, Parker is 170th in OPS and 159th in adjusted OPS. If we once again just look at right fielders, he ranks inside the top 15 in extra base hits, RBIs, total bases, and hits. He's top 25 in times on base and runs scored, and top 45 in WAR. Among 110 right fielders with at least 5,000 plate appearances, he's 61st in OPS and 51st in adjusted OPS. Again, If we change the minimum threshold to 7,500 plate appearances, in which there have been 36 right fielders to achieve that amount, Parker is 25th in OPS and 24th in adjusted OPS. So, based on everything said so far, during Parker's entire career, he was a top 5 hitter for counting stats and a top 20 hitter period. During that 12-year span mentioned before, Dave Parker was undoubtedly a top 15 hitter, arguably top 10. He's within the top 10 in several offensive stats, including hits, extra base hits, and OPS. For over a decade, Dave Parker was, at worst, the third best right fielder in baseball. The only two right fielders that one can say were better during this time were Dave Winfield, a Hall of Famer, and Dwight Evans, a player that should have been inducted into the Hall of Fame some 25 years ago. When compared to all players throughout MLB history, Parker is within the top 70 in several counting stats, and there's no doubt he's one of the most productive right fielders of all time. A top 20 ranking in many offensive categories, while having a decent placement in OPS and adjusted OPS. With all that being said, why exactly is one of the greatest right fielders of all time, with a ton of amazing stats, who was a terrific fielder as well, and won an MVP award, not in the Hall of Fame? There's a number of reasons, but the main one I believe to be the case was that Dave Parker's greatness was too short. Yes, I'm well aware I noted his prime to span 12 years, but his really good seasons were contained in a shorter amount of time, and that caused his stats to be top-heavy. What exactly do I mean? In a 5-year span from 1975 to 1979, Dave Parker was arguably the best player out there. During that stretch, he slashed .321 with a .377 on base and .532 slugging for a .909 OPS and 147 adjusted OPS, while earning an incredible 31.1 WAR. For context, his OPS is the third highest of any player during that span, his adjusted OPS the fourth highest, and his WAR also the fourth highest. Couple with great defense, and you have yourself at worst a top 3 player in the league. However, in a combined 14 seasons outside that span, Parker slashed .276 with a .321 on base and .443 slugging for 764 OPS while earning 9.1 WAR. Yes, over 75% of his career WAR came within about a fourth of his playing time. Legendary stats in that short span, but he was about an average player outside of it. Although, despite that, I still say Dave Parker deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. His legendary peak may have been short, but he was still productive for many years afterwards, and overall was one of the most consistent and reliable hitters in the league. There are only so many players throughout history that have matched what he was able to accomplish. Actually, let's check on that. Of the over 23,000 players ever to play in Major League Baseball, only 29 others have ever matched Dave Parker's totals in hits, extra base hits, RBIs, runs, total bases, times on base, and WAR. 23 of those 29 are in the Hall of Fame. Of the 6 that aren't, 3 have ties to PEDs: Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, and Rafael Palmeiro. 2 more, Albert Pujols and Miguel Cabrera, aren't eligible yet, but for certain will be inducted on their first ballot. That last player not in is Carlos Beltran, who is currently on the main ballot, and I would be surprised if he doesn't get inducted sooner than later. Dave Parker statistically is on par with some of the greatest players of all time. Not to mention, he also has a generous amount of black ink, meaning he led the league in a statistic many times. Once did he lead the league in hits, RBIs, OPS, adjusted OPS, and WAR. Twice did he lead in doubles and batting average, and 3 times did he lead in total bases. Dave Parker wasn't just the best in one category one time, he was the best in several stats many times. There are very, very few players throughout MLB history that posted the stats or had the peak that Dave Parker had. He's had one of the most decorated and accomplished careers that any player has had, and rightfully deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.